Throughout my life, action games have been at the forefront of gaming for me. Fast-paced combat, in-depth combat mechanics, and streamlined level design are some of the key elements that make action games some of the most fun gaming experiences out there. In today's video, I'm going to be breaking down 10 plus action games through history that are a 10 out of 10 for me. Now remember, if your favorite action game doesn't make the list, that doesn't mean it's not a 10 out of 10 or a good game. This is just volume 1 for me, as I will make more considering the vast array of incredible action games over the nearly 4 decades I have been playing video games. Now, I also want to stress this list will be pure action games or games where action is at the forefront of every single level and the design, without too much interference from other genres like adventure or RPG games. But before we get into it, what's good everyone? OJ here. Welcome back to another video. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you are someone new, click that notification bell, and don't forget to drop some of your favorite action games of all time in the comment section while you watch this video. Let's go ahead and jump right into the first title, and that is Vanquish on the Xbox 360 and the Xbox One. Now, when I originally played Vanquish on the Xbox 360 from Platinum Games, I was blown away by how incredible and fast-paced this game was. This was a 30 frames per second game on the Xbox 360. They bumped it up to 60 frames per second on the Xbox One version, but it played so fast on the 360. It felt like it was moving way faster than it actually was. This was all about the arcade action that Platinum brings to the table. You had this guy, Sam Gideon. The story was pretty much irrelevant. It was all about the combat, a variety of different weapons to shoot. You have these blasters on your knees and you can slide around and boost and dodge through the battlefield. It's a cover shooter, so you can get behind cover. Really good cover system. Think almost like Gears of War on steroids, just super faster than Gears of War, and it played like a dream. The controls were so silky smooth. It was a ton of fun to go through. I pretty much ignored the story because the story wasn't relevant, but when it comes to action games, for me, a 10 out of 10, yes, having a great story would be awesome, but it's all about how the game plays. It's all about the pacing of the game. It's about how fast it goes and what it does to keep you engaged in the next level, the next thing, the streamlined level design. That's what's important to me. And Vanquish, really to this day, even though it's been a decade plus since I originally beat the game, it still speaks to me. It still kind of says, okay, this is what it's supposed to be for a third-person shooter, which it's sad that we haven't gotten a Vanquish 2 because this game is absolutely incredible. Do yourself a favor, check out Vanquish if you can on the Xbox One, backwards compatible Xbox Series, or PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5. It comes with Bayonetta as well, and it's a phenomenal experience. You will not regret it. Vanquish is easily one of the best third-person shooter action games of all time. Next up, God of War on the PlayStation 2 and God of War 2 on the PlayStation 2. Now, let's make sure that we're very clear about what we're talking about. I'm not talking about God of War when it comes to the new 2018 game on the PlayStation 4 and then God of War Ragnarok on the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5. I'm talking about the original OG God of War games. These games were like anything when they first came out. Now, we all know that the quick time events are kind of played out at this point. It's been done to death. But back then with the original God of War, how visceral it was, the controls, the combat, the graphics, everything came together for the perfect storm in 2005. It was super cool to scale these huge titans out there, these big bosses, and have these context sensitive button presses that seemed to just line up perfectly with what Sony was doing with the PlayStation controller and the circle and the X and the triangle and the square. It just felt awesome to pull off. A bunch of different combos, a lot of difficulty in there, really cool enemies to fight, and great levels as you go through. Do some platforming and some other little things, but for the most part, it's a pure action game where you're out there just destroying people with some light elements here and there with puzzle and other stuff. But I absolutely loved the original God of War. I felt that it was a 10 out of 10 when I first played it. And another thing to kind of note with this list, guys, is that it's also kind of set towards when the game came out, not going back and playing it right now, but my impressions in terms of what I remembered and how awesome it was. God of War was just that. Now, in today's day, might not be that 10 out of 10 for everyone, but for me at the time, and even looking back at what it did historically, I think it was a 10 out of 10 experience. Now, you can say the same thing, everything that the original did with God of War, and times it by like 5 or maybe even more. It was more brutal, it was bigger, it was badder, it was better, it had more weapons, more combat, more abilities, more gameplay, more replay value, even better story, which kind of happened like at the end. There was a situation there that people didn't like, but overall God of War 2 was a massive success and a huge leap over what we saw with God of War 1. It's very similar to what people felt about Mass Effect 1 to Mass Effect 2. That leap when it comes to how the game played and everything that it offered, that's what God of War did for me back in 2007 when I played it. Day one, I just felt that God of War 2 just had everything. And I just loved the boss battles in God of War 2. God of War 2's boss battles, I think they took what worked in God of War 1, kind of threw out what didn't work, but then added in a bunch of cool sequences and events where you're kind of like soaring through the skies and going down in a blaze. It's just super fun to play through, and I still go back and play God of War 2 HD, hoping for a return. God of War 3 is not on my list here, but man, God of War 3 easily could have been. That game is also incredible. The old school God of War games are legend, and that's why it's a 10 out of 10 action game for me. Next up is Batman Arkham City on the Xbox 360 back in 2011, and everything that you see, I think, with this point going forward with superhero games, what Batman Arkham City did. Now, there were games like Assassin's Creed and other titles that kind of had some of that combat in terms of being surrounded and fighting in that type of way, but Batman did it way better than Assassin's Creed. Batman, I think still to this day, you can go back and play Batman Arkham City on the Xbox 360 and say, this is the best superhero game of all time. Now, there are some slight adventure elements. Obviously, Batman Arkham City, you have a huge area, there's different things that you do, but for the most part, it's all action. It's action and some light elements of other things. And the action in this game is so good and so well done. The combat in this game is so well done with the upgrades and the controls and the different maneuvers that you can do and what you do within Arkham City. It's just an unforgettable experience. I had so much fun playing this game, and to me, it really shaped what superhero games and what action games did going forward. A lot of developers wanted to copy Batman Arkham City because of the massive success that it had reviews, critically, and sales wise. It was pretty much a double whammy, but when you played the game, you really felt like Batman. To me, it was the first time that I played a superhero game and I felt totally in control of Batman in an action type of game, like where you're punching, the movements, the animations, everything was just super great. And it has plenty of replay value. You can use multiple different heroes. There's a bunch of extra content to play as. There's arenas to kind of fight through, so if you love just fighting in the game, they've got that for you. Still, 10 plus years later, Batman Arkham City is just as playable as it's ever been and still stands the test of time as a 10 out of 10 action game. Let's get into Hades here on the Nintendo Switch back in 2020. I've talked about it quite a number of times. This is a love-hate game, but I actually went back and played it. I played it on the PlayStation 5 in addition to the Nintendo Switch, and this game is a 10 out of 10 action game. And the reason why I'm saying that is because everything that you thought that action games should do in terms of pacing, when it comes to combat, when it comes to variety, it does it. You want different types of weapons that truly make an impact on how you play, where, when, and how. Hades has that. You want different upgrades and abilities that allow you to leverage what you're doing on the map at the time and still being able to formulate different types of strategies to fight enemies. Hades has that with the different god powers. You want the fast-paced, different types of levels, arenas, layouts in order to strategize as well. Hades has that. Hades has everything that you would love to see in a great action game. I'm only angry that it's a rogue game, but it's still a 10 out of 10 experience. That's the only issue that I have, and I would love for them to make a standard game, like a standard action game that's not a rogue game with Hades, and I think that it could be even better, but obviously we don't have that. Hades 2 is coming, but for this list and what I'm talking about here, I wanted to go over the games that truly had that impact on me, because this was the action rogue game that made me say, okay, I'm gonna take rogue games seriously. It was this one. I hated them before, even though there's been some incredible rogue games and all of that before Hades. This was the action rogue game that truly made me say, okay, I'm breaking the curse and I'm actually going to start beating them. And I've played some other ones that are also incredible. Dead Cells, for example, that could have easily been on this list, but to me, Hades does everything right, and it has the benefit. I don't really worry about story too much, but just like God of War and just like Batman, those have great stories. Hades also has fantastic characters, great voice acting, great story, great setup, great music. There's so many incredible things about Hades and what makes the core action fun to play, quick, responsive, smooth. So Hades absolutely had to be on my 10 out of 10 action game list. Next up, we've got a double whammy of Capcom and Devil May Cry. Devil May Cry on the PlayStation 2 back in 2001, and Devil May Cry 4 on the Xbox 360 back in 2008. And honestly, Devil May Cry 3 Special Edition could absolutely be on this list as well, but these two games in particular had a huge impact on me that makes me say the 10 out of 10, not only in terms of what they did gameplay wise, but also when they came out and what they did at that time. Now, Devil May Cry 1, the original on the PS2, this was supposed to be a Resident Evil game that was repurposed by Hideki Kamiya because it strayed too far from what Resident Evil actually was or Resident Evil is. And seriously, thank the Platinum gods they did this, because Devil May Cry was a revolution when it came out in 2001. There was nothing else on the market like it. This whole hit enemies up, stylish action, different type of combat. That was just something that we hadn't seen, where you have that meter and the combos are going. You've seen combos before, you've seen air combos before, you've seen that, but you've never seen a game blend the two so seamlessly and make it to where it was actually cool to do it in a certain type of way. There was a rhythm, the music, everything kind of gelled and started all of this, started that action or that stylish action revolution that we saw throughout the 2000s and all the way up even till this point with DMC5 and all that, right? DMC5 was awesome, but Devil May Cry 4, to me, that was really impactful, because what they did is they took the experience that you know and love with DMC1, DMC3, they expanded upon it, they added in a new character, but it was the first one in HD. It was the first time you saw Dante and those characters beautifully rendered, looking incredible with Nero and his arm and everything that you can do there, and the content and the boss battles. It was just a spectacle at the time in 2008 that you truly felt this is a next gen action game. This is what the future can bring for games like this. Maybe God of War is going to be coming, right, with something like this, because at that time God of War was not out yet on the PlayStation 3. So it was super cool to see Devil May Cry 4 and the combat and the controls and the gameplay and the bosses. It was a revolution with the action game community online and everyone talking about it. So these two games for me were the 10 out of 10 experiences. Next up is something that I'm very happy to talk about, and it's Super Metroid from the Super Nintendo back in 1994, and it's Metroid Dread on the Nintendo Switch 2021 release. Now, starting off with Super Metroid, this to me was an eye-opener. I had never played anything with the amount of graphics, the speed, the gameplay. Yes, we have the original Metroid, but that original Metroid compared to Super Metroid, we know like leaps, right? From Mass Effect 1 to Mass Effect 2. We've talked about maybe even Uncharted 1 to Uncharted 2. This was a gigantic leap. Like the technology from the NES to the Super Nintendo and what they were able to do back on the Super NES in 1994 with Ridley and how he comes out towards the screen and everything with the music and the gameplay and the areas and the locales and the weaponry. Super Metroid set a new standard for this type of 2D side-scrolling action game. That was the game. We didn't have a lot of publications doing ratings like we have now, but I'm telling you, if the games media was like it is now at this point back in 1994, this might be right up there with Ocarina of Time. I don't know anybody who didn't give this game a 10 out of 10 because it was that good. Speed running got started on this because you have your time, you want to get different types of endings or see certain things with that. There were so many things that Super Metroid innovated on and made popular. Even still to this point, people are still doing things in terms of design that Super Metroid started back in the day. The atmosphere was almost unmatched at the time. I don't think there's any other Super Nintendo game that you can truly say has the atmosphere of Super Metroid and the type of gameplay. So to me, Super Metroid, absolutely a 10 out of 10 action game. And let's talk about Metroid Dread. Obviously, a lot of you guys have played this game, but if you haven't, Metroid Dread pretty much channels the essence of Super Metroid. Metroid Dread is the Super Metroid of the new generation. It's that breakout Metroid game that does so many things within the action genre that it got a nomination for Game of the Year, which is crazy because this type of game isn't a popular style 2D side-scrolling action game, but it's that good with the Emmys and how they did that and the sense of dread. It lives up to its name and the controls, and I think that's really what takes this to the new level, because back in 1994, Super Metroid, the controls were praised with the L&R. That was new for consoles. Nintendo bringing the L&R and the face buttons and the fact that you can aim diagonally, that was huge. But if you go back and play Super Metroid and compare the controls to Metroid Dread, it's not even close. Metroid Dread sets a new standard for these type of games. I don't think I've played a game that has better controls than Metroid Dread in the action genre. Pinpoint accuracy when you move, run, jump, shoot. It is incredible. The attention to detail is out of control here when it comes to Metroid Dread, and the gameplay matches it. It's a non-stop action fest where you're going through, blasting your way, getting cool weapons, and has one of the best ending sequences of all time. Best Metroid ending sequence. And I'll say this too, the combat and the boss battles in the game are the best in the series to me, at least. I felt it was that good. 10 out of 10 experiences are not easy to come by for me. I don't just dish them out, but these two games absolutely earned it with Super Metroid and Metroid Dread. Next up is one that I'm probably going to get people saying, wait a minute, OJ, hold up, what's going on here? And that is Astral Chain on the Nintendo Switch 2019. And I know I've talked about this game being an action RPG and people argue back and forth. And honestly, this game, if you want to just have it as an action game, which many of you guys do, here it is in this list. If you want to have it as an action RPG as well, because of the intrinsic elements of what you do with equipping and your different legions, and those are kind of your party members, all the different RPG mechanics that play a part into this that are underneath the hood, you can. But for this video, we're going to talk about it as an action game because that's essentially, in terms of the design and the layout, it does that incredibly well with some RPG stuff layered once again in the background. But let's talk about this game as an action title because a lot of you guys have not played it, and I'm going to keep on singing the praises of Astral Chain forever at this point because it's that good of a game. I think that the action in here, the combat, is some of the most unique and innovative combat that we have seen. It gives me the same vibes that I felt when I played Devil May Cry back in the day, or when I played another game that we're going to talk about back in the day as well. It is that good. It combines everything that Platinum Games has learned from various different titles over the years and kind of combines it, then adds a whole new flavor on top of it. The graphics are sleek, the controls are are awesome. The gameplay is super fun. The story is a little bit cliched and all of that, and I get some of it with it. But once again, what makes a 10 out of 10 action game to me is the actual action in the game, and how awesome is that? And Astral Chain delivers on all those fronts. Plus, it has some of the best replay value, content, structure, innovation, in addition to afterwards. It's complete right there on cartridge. And one of the things that you'll see with a lot of these games that I'm talking about is that they're all complete. You don't have to sit there and download a bunch of extra stuff or other things. Everything starts and finishes right then and there on the cartridge, right there in that playthrough. And that makes an action game just feel even more engrossing and more fun to play to me, when I don't have to worry about 15 different expansions or other things. Astral Chain takes care of that. After you already beat the game, there's more to do. And I think that's one of the best things about an action game, because usually they're not as long, but you still want to play and explore the depth of the combat. Astral Chain has that in leagues and spades when it comes to how great the combat is and what you can do with the different legions, with your upgrading, with your own character, with your customization. It brings it all to the table. A 10 out of 10 to me is when they hit on all of those cylinders, and Astral Chain fires on every single one of them. Last but definitely not least, we have Bayonetta from the Xbox 360 back in 2010 and the Nintendo Switch version that I played, in addition to Bayonetta 2 from the Wii U in 2014, where I first really played it and felt it was a 10 out of 10, and of course the Nintendo Switch. Now, I've played a variety of these games on other platforms, but I'm simply giving you what I've played in terms of the original system that it was on that I played it. Now, Bayonetta 1, for example, that when we talk about innovation, right, when we talk about DMC, when we talk about Astral Chain and the feeling that I got, that's the feeling that I got when it comes to Bayonetta. I felt this was the new age Devil May Cry about 10 years later. From 2001 Devil May Cry to 2010 for Bayonetta 1, the original. About 10 years in between them, and I felt this was truly the evolution that I wanted to see Devil May Cry going, but it didn't. It had crazy new advancements, weapons on your hands and your feet, being able to mix and match the verse system compared to just the level system in going through. So the verses were pretty cool, how they kind of broke it up, the different areas that you can go into, challenge rooms and fight. There were so many things that Bayonetta did that innovated within the action genre, and even adding in new in-depth mechanics to really take advantage when it comes to expert level play. Dodge offset was something that nobody had ever done, that I'd never seen in an action game, where you can be going on a combo, you can hold down the button, do a dodge or two, then continue where you left off and get better bonuses, better multipliers, and even have more skill layered on top of the already in-depth combat system with crazy air combos and a bunch of different weapons. To me, this is exactly how you built an action game, and Bayonetta back in 2010 on the 360 was just wild. It was wild to see what you can do, expert play. You guys are seeing some of it right here. It is incredible to see all the different combinations, and that's what makes an action game incredible, a 10 out of 10 experience, when you can have that level of play to where if you're a beginner, you can pick it up, mash some buttons, have some fun, and that's great and all. You can get through the game and play it on whatever difficulty. But if you're someone that truly wants to get great at the game, it's there for you. All the tools are there, and that's the difference between a bad action game or a simple action game and a really good 10 out of 10 experience, for me at least, when it comes to action titles. Now, Bayonetta 2, once again, just like God of War on the original PS2 to God of War 2, this is the same thing here. A little bit more time in between from 2010 to 2014, but Bayonetta 2 took everything that was great with the original and said, all right, we're gonna times that by 10. There were so many cool things in this game. They still brought back the dodge offset. They still brought back a lot of the mechanics that we've seen with Witch Time and all the stuff that just makes it fun, but they also added in a bunch of cool set pieces with the wicked weaves, with different things you can do there. The game was just bigger in scope and scale overall. They removed a lot of the annoying things that were kind of like the instant fail parts, but then added in fun elements into the game, secrets into the game, different things that were kind of like Nintendo-ish, right? You had the outfits and you had the Star Fox stage. There were so many cool things that Bayonetta 2 did, but ultimately at the end of the day, Bayonetta 2 felt to me like the cleanest action game that I've ever played. The controls were so on point, despite not being a solid set 60 frames per second. I never felt on the Wii U or the Nintendo Switch like the frame rate or there were issues or there were lag or anything was interfering with my ability to completely wreck people on stage. And when I got beat, it was okay, it was my fault. But Bayonetta seemed to fix so many issues that other action games have dealt with. Even with Bayonetta 1, with some of the camera stuff and some of the issues there, Bayonetta 2 fixed so much of that, and the pacing was well done. Better story, better pacing, better combat, and more variety within the combat with what you can do with the weapons. And on top of that, adding in online multiplayer to where you can play with your friends. That was something that was new, and still to this day, out of all the Bayonetta games, it's the only one to have that tag climax mode that you get halos from there. It transfers back over to the main game. So ultimately, you can still be playing that game to this day. The online is still available to play if you want to play with yourself and a CPU or have a friend play. So to me, when you add in all of those factors, it's not just what the game does, but also what it offers within its combat system. I've talked about the depth before, and that's what Bayonetta 2 does. It takes all of the best elements that I've talked about with so many of these games and puts it all into one package to create a 10 out of 10 experience that still to this point, I'm thinking, yeah, that's the best one. It's Bayonetta 2 from the Wii U and of course on the Nintendo Switch. But there are probably a lot more 10 out of 10 experiences that maybe I didn't list, but you guys feel is part of that. This is where you guys come in. Let me know your 10 out of 10 experiences when it comes to pure action games and what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section, and let me know what other lists when it comes to gaming genres that you want me to give my 10 out of 10s on. I am up to pretty much doing anything when it comes down to it. Make sure you check out my 10 out of 10 RPGs list, volume 1. I will be doing another one of those because I've got a few more rounds that I think that I can do. So thank you guys so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, check out the vids on screen right here, and we will catch you for the next one. Peace.